Bitcoin has been dumping towards the downside since the last video. We've actually dumped about 8k US dollars over here, and we need to be talking about why we're dumping and what's going to be happening next. We have a flashing signal right now actually indicating that potentially we may be seeing further downside, so we need to be talking about this signal as well. I have a lot of different charts and a lot of different data pieces actually ready for you guys, so that we need to be dissecting what's likely to be happening next and why, of course, we've been dumping. So make sure to be watching till the end. I'm also going to be covering altcoins and quantitative tightening that's ending today, and of course I'm going to be talking about Ethereum. So with that being said, let's not waste any more time. Let's go straight away in towards this banger. Bow. So like mentioned in the intro, we've been dumping towards the downside, and the Coinbase premiums actually flipped back negative. So of course, the Coinbase premium previously actually flipped negative earlier in November. And of course, this was the start of the downturn that we've been seeing. And ever since it's been red, we've been going towards the downside. But once it actually marked its bottom and it started to recover, Bitcoin has been pumping. But right now, the Coinbase premium is flipping negative again. And this is potentially indicating that we're going to be seeing further moves towards the downside. We can see in more detail by this chart over here that when it actually peaked towards the downside and started subsiding, that's where we actually had the bounce, and right now it's flipping negative. So this is not a good time to be seeing. And you may be asking, why is it flipping negative? What is the, jitters, and what's the kind of uncertainty in the market right now that's causing us to be dumping? And that's essentially the Japanese 10-year government bonds actually surging to the highest level since 2008, which of course was the financial crisis. And of course, that was a time where prices came down significantly and there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. And we're seeing the same thing happening right now. So of course, what does this mean for Bitcoin? What's the game plan? What are we going to be expecting, you may be asking? And I would like to actually draw your attention to the news for today. So of course, we have quantitative tightening ending today, and we're going to be having Powell speaking. So these are two things that we need to be paying attention to, because I do think that this is the main talking point for today and the main thing that could potentially move markets further towards the downside, or we can actually see some sort of a bounce. Now, looking at what happened when we had a speech from Powell last time, we actually pumped in towards the speech and then we had a dump. And right now we're seeing the same thing where we had a pump previously. And today we're actually starting to dump, and Powell is scheduled to speak today. So of course, this may actually indicate that we can move towards the downside if he's more hawkish. But of course, if we actually look at the probabilities for a rate cut, you can see that we have an 87.4% probability of a rate cut. So it's likely that Powell is not going to be too hawkish, and he may be more dovish, which can actually lead to a bounce in the market. So this is one thing to be bearing in mind, because if we're going to be seeing a rate cut, of course, in the longer term, these rate cuts are recessionary, and it means that we can actually see a bear market first before we actually see a bull market later on in the latter stages of 2026. But as of now, I do think that Powell is not going to be too hawkish, and potentially we won't be dumping as much. But of course, you don't know what's going to be happening. And last time that we actually had a speech, we actually moved towards the downside, which actually was the start of this downturn that we've been seeing in November. But of course, today is December, it's a new month, and Powell is speaking. So we need to be paying attention to what's going to be happening, because it can be a thing where we continue towards the downside based on some unexpected news and unexpected comments from Powell. Now, you may be asking, are we still going to be getting a relief rally? I've covered this scenario in previous videos, but in case you haven't seen it, previously in every bull market, once we lost the 50-week moving average, we actually retraced back to it, retested it before entering a bear market, and I still do think that this is the more probable scenario that's going to be happening. So you can see in 2021, 2017, and 2014, every time that we lost a 50-week moving average, we came to retest it before starting the bear market, and I don't think this year is going to be any different. Now, in the videos, I talked about the yearly open resistance, and I said that we need to be breaking above the yearly open to actually confirm that retest in the 50-week moving average, and that's why we're going to be heading towards the downside and towards the bear market. But right now, we've seen that we've rejected it off of this news of the Japanese 10-year government bonds. So until we can actually reclaim the yearly open, then I do think that we're going to be spending some price action below, and it's potentially the case where we sweep this wick like I talked about in the previous video, offering a decent trading opportunity in towards the 50-week moving average, and then that's where we're going to be, topping out for the cycle. So in the case that we just keep dumping and we can't actually reclaim the sweep of this wick, I do think that the next support level is going to be this level over here at 70k, where we previously had resistance in 2024 before breaking to new highs. I do think that a move towards this level over here is going to provide an awesome trading opportunity where we can actually move towards the upside, and then we can potentially see that lower high, whether it's a little bit above the 50-week or literally at the 50-week moving average, and then that's where we can actually see a move towards the downside. but it's still going to be a great opportunity to be taking a long position, and then we can actually trade it towards a 50-week moving average. So this is going to be the plan if we actually move towards the downside further. And I do have my account ready on WEEX, so if you want to be trading for yourself, make sure to be using the first link down below for WEEX. You can see right now I have 50k ready to be deploying if we actually move towards the downside. So I'm going to be taking a position live on the channel, and we can be, getting some nice profits, and we can be seeing potentially a bounce that's likely. So the reason I think this is going to be a great trading opportunity is the fact that we're not only going to be sweeping our lows that we have in the short term, we're also going to be sweeping our tariff lows that we had in April. And of course, this is going to be a massive opportunity where liquidity is going to be grabbed. We're going to be sweeping this low at 80k and moving in towards that 70k mark, and then I do think that a bounce is likely, at least even in towards the yearly open. If the 50-week moving average trends a bit steeper, then I do think that this is going to be offering a great risk to reward opportunity, and then that's where we can actually look at opening a short position towards the downside as well. So if you want to be trading Bitcoin as well and altcoins for yourself, make sure to check that first link down below for WEEX. WEEX is one of the best exchanges since you have the cheapest fees across the industry. So you can get a 25% fee rebate, and of course a $300 once you do sign up. And once you sign up for WEEX and you deposit onto the exchange, you can get a massive 20% on top of your deposit. So make sure to be checking our first link down below for WEEX. You can see right now the things you have to do. So of course, once you deposit funds, for example $2,000, you could be trading, and once you trade up to 200k in volume, which is quite easy to actually achieve, you can be getting a $400 bonus on top. So make sure to be checking out first link down below for WEEX, especially if you're a high volume trader. This is the exchange that has the cheapest fees to be trading with, and of course we're looking at a trading position right now that we can potentially be taking. So make sure to actually be having your accounts ready on WEEX, so that once I do actually alert the signal on the channel, you guys are ready and we can be actually making some nice profits. So looking at the ETF inflows, we can see that we have one of the biggest outflows that we've ever had. So of course this is a massive signal that can potentially actually mark a bottom, since the last time this happened we actually bottomed as well. So of course right now we have a massive inflow, we have a massive outflow, but again I do want to be mentioning that it's not a good thing to be seeing. This potentially can be a sign as well that we're actually starting to enter a bear market, since a lot of people are actually selling. So this is one thing to be noting, but I do think that of course seeing open interest flushing just like we did previously can actually be a signal that this is a bottom, since a lot of people are getting flushed out. So of course this is one thing to be noting. And on top of that, we have the USDT dominance reaching an overbought territory and hitting major resistance. So I do think that if we can see the USDT dominance start to move towards the downside again, even if it comes towards the mid-range level, I do think that Bitcoin is going to find a nice bounce. So we need to be observing what's going to be happening with the USDT dominance right now, because it looks like we're heading into this resistance quite strongly, and we can potentially be forming inverse head and shoulders here if you look very carefully. So of course this is one thing to be noting. If we do break above this 7% mark here, I do think that we can actually see the USDT dominance actually climb towards the next level. But right now the USDT dominance has an overbought signal on the stochastic RSI, and every time this happened we actually move towards the downside, and this just means that money from stable coins are going to be moving into Bitcoin and altcoins, and then you're going to be seeing a bounce in the market. So in a medium time frame, you can see we have some support right now from this diagonal support level, and you can also see that big Phoenix whales are actually longing, and every time the big Phoenix whales have actually started to increase their long positions, you can see that I actually marked bottoms in the market. So right now it is indicating that if we can actually reclaim that yearly open, we can potentially rally into that 50-week moving average, and then that's where potentially we can actually top out, and that's where you can actually take some short positions, because I do think that once we hit that level, we're going to be moving towards the downside again. So again, in that longer time frame, I've mentioned this on the channel quite a lot, but of course this chart essentially just shows the timing cycles, and you can see by the dotted orange lines, which is the Bitcoin halving, that when you actually project it 500 days in advance, shown by the green vertical bars, then of course this indicates that this is the timing that Bitcoin typically tops, and right now we've exceeded that point and Bitcoin's been moving towards the downside ever since. So I do think that if we do get that relief rally in towards that 50-week moving average, I do think that that's going to be an opportunity where we can actually take a short position, because I do think that the time is up for Bitcoin, and I still believe in the 4-year cycles, since this is the data that's actually been presented to us and it's something that we can actually rely on. I do think that we can actually move towards the downside again. So I'm not going to be, fading this. I do think that if we can actually, see a bounce now, then the 50-week moving average is a great opportunity to be taking a short. And if we actually don't get that bounce, so we continue towards the downside, then this is the level I'm interested in taking a position. So if you have any questions about that, make sure to comment down below, since this is quite clear. You know, short term, we can actually see a bouncing towards the 50-week moving average, whether that means we come down first or we actually move now. You know, that's the target where we're going to be topping out, and these are the two levels that I do expect Bitcoin to actually bounce from. But of course, like mentioned, quantitative tightening is ending today, and every time QT ends, it is actually marking a top for the Bitcoin dominance, and this is where potentially we can be seeing altcoins actually move towards the upside. But again, like mentioned in the previous videos, this is going to take a long time, and it can actually take the whole bear market before we actually see before we see any signs of quantitative easing. Just because QT is ending doesn't mean that the Fed is going to start easing again and we're not going to be seeing the total assets actually increasing. It may just mean that this chart actually flattens out for a bit, the blue line actually flattens out for a bit, and then once we actually see QE in towards the bear market bottom, then we actually see the Federal Reserve total assets actually increase. That's where we can potentially see, you know, the market pick up again, which you can see by the timing at the bottom there. It's going to be taking quite a long time. So the majority of 2026 in towards 2027, that's where we could be seeing the liquidity from quantitative easing actually playing out, and potentially the Bitcoin dominance actually moving towards the downside again. And that's where we could be seeing some sort of an altcoin season. But of course, right now, looking at the Ethereum inflows for the Bitcoin ETF in November, you can see that we've had the biggest outflow that we've ever seen for this. So of course, this is a warning signal indicating that potentially this is going to be the start of, you know, massive selling for Ethereum as we enter a bear market. So that's not the best thing to be seeing. We need to be seeing that picking up again. But in the short term, we can see that the stochastic RSI is oversold for Ethereum. So of course, it's likely we can get some sort of a bounce eventually. And if we actually start to see a bounce, I do think that the rejection point will be the bull market support band for Ethereum in and around that 3.7k mark, and then that's where we can actually see us moving towards the bear market again. And of course, this equates to the 50-week moving average for Bitcoin. It's a similar bounce where you actually retrace quite a bit and then you move towards the downside again. So of course, that's the game plan for Ethereum. So in the short term, we're seeing some weakness, but of course, if we do reclaim this 50-week moving average, which is the white line, we can actually test the bull market support band, and then that's where we can actually see a move towards the downside again. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, make sure to be commenting down below, and make sure to be following me on X to be staying up to date with all my updates. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a blessed rest of your day. Peace, guys. See ya. Bye bye.